I'm now inside and on the first floor of one of the National Museums of History. There are several in the city. When I look at elaborate carved sarcophagus like this, I wonder what the owners thought would take place with their remains in the future. I wonder what happened to all the other sarcophagi and all of their bones. And did these motifs, these reliefs, try to indicate how they lived or how they wanted to live or some noble theme they had in their mind? Most of what we'll see in here are Roman copies of Greek statues, often used as beautiful pieces of garden ornamentation. They were painted, which is something that very difficult for my 21st century mind to get around, although I've seen an example of it in National Geographic. We're now in a section on epigraphs, and epigraphy, to read here, is the study of epigraphs, or inscriptions, Latin inscriptions, and therefore the study of a particular type of written text. Again, I'll wander around this room in the hopes that I find something that will be uniquely interesting. I remember at the Sistine Chapel, one of the great hallways was blocked off, but we could see through the grill, and the whole hallway was epigraphs, in other words, plaques of writings from various times on various things. The scraps of marble with writing on it might be called epigraphs that we saw at the forum yesterday. These are just some examples of writing. That one on porphyry, again, a very hard stone. Others on bronze, some on lead, lots on what would be called stucco or plaster. It indicates that inscriptions like this were numerous. There were over 100,000 that have been documented in the city of Rome alone, ancient ones, and that's just a small percentage estimated of the many that must exist. And to an archaeologist, of course, these are little tiny haunting snippets of history. This, for example, looks like the layout of some building, which would give us, for example, an idea specifically, perhaps, how they laid out some buildings. Following up on my theme of yesterday of if we land on planets sometime in the vast future, and we'd land on a planet and find nothing until sometime someone turns over a little stone, and there, something that looks like an epigram. This library is laid out beautifully, like you'd like to see all places laid out. Anyway, we're in the Archaic period, 8th to 5th century BC. It points out that starting around 7th BC was the formation of cities and urban areas. In other words, consistent formation, predictable, as well as the use of inscriptions, and that those were connected somehow as two concepts. Here's a description of what's called a fibula, perhaps because somehow it looks like the bone, but there are inscriptions on that. But I saw several of these in these different museums, the Etruscan museums. I don't know what they're used for. This I can't quite understand, but apparently somewhere in here. This is representing a stratigraphy archaeology effort in which some writing was found indicating a law that threatened death. But it's these little snippets of archaeological history, if you will, if that's not redundant, that helps collectively to build a story. This explanation suggests that underneath this area here, where there's some black slabs of stone surrounded by white, they found seven layers of prior sequence, and that this, they believe, represents the predestined place of Romulus's death. students often ask me in class, well, so how do they know this stuff about these old times? And this is an example of how they do. It's like the jigsaw puzzle, really, in 3-dimension of time and place and physical. Now here are just some artifacts. These are little figures here, but surrounding it are little bowls and pans and so forth. But to the person who's the expert on these, a person who dwells on these little figurines probably can make all kinds of differentiations and draw various possible conclusions, which again are just one more tiny little infinitesimal piece of the picture. Here are some fragments of carvings that indicate many different things there. You can see a wheel device and a man's foot, but anyway, apparently that reflects that at the period of the 17th century there was a shift from the little huts made out of daub or wood or branches or whatever to stone, and that these may well have been the king's residences. But again, small detail like this begins to build this huge holistic picture. When you walk through the Forum, one of the senses you get is that you haven't a clue. It's like looking up at the sky and asking yourself, what does all this mean? You know so little about what you're looking at when you look at the sky as to render what you know useless. This is what archaeologists are challenged by, and that is trying to decipher this phenomenally giant and complex picture, piece by infinitesimal piece over history of archaeology. And it's for that reason that I spent the first day or two in my history classes convincing students, do not believe anything you read in history, because it's all tentative, regardless of the foolish fantasy of textbooks. These long goodies are apparently iron spits, and these bronze cups, now we see them almost totally deteriorated, but imagine if they were brand new, and imagine the context of the people using them. Now here we're looking at an iron sword with bronze fittings. You can see the bronze fittings because they're green. And this is apparently in situ. In other words, they took it out of the ground as it is, kept it intact. Okay, I'm right. These little things that I've been seeing are pins, or what they call buckles. Things particularly like that sword or these buckles that were used every day by somebody. I'm always reminded of when I sold the house that I built out in Teton Village and thought would be a monument to my existence. And after I sold it, it was torn down and gone within a month or two. That there is very little that we do that is permanent, and only our egos make us think it can be otherwise. This little plaque found attached to an offering from the 6th century says, "To Castor and Pollux, the young men-at-arms." These are the two probably fictional characters for whom a temple is named in the Forum that appeared at the forefront of a battle, and then after the battle had been won, mysteriously, instantaneously appeared in Rome to announce the winning of the battle. Notice some more of these figurines. Notice the differences in style that we can detect. These are items that were found in wells. For some curious reason, people over time have found it either necessary or by mistake or chance to drop things or throw things into wells. A great repository for archaeologists. This is a votive statue, one of thousands found near religious temples in dating from the 2nd and 3rd century. But its simplicity in the body, its elongation, reminds me of of these modern-looking statues from one of the Greek Mediterranean islands of antiquity. These were thought to be 2nd or 3rd BC century, either offerings or, let's say home tabernacles or religious something or others, or even souvenirs. So suggesting that the trash that we buy from the souvenir hawkers may somehow, someday, end up in some future museum. Don't dwell too long. This one, where would you put it? In the men's? Remember, some votive offerings were in different cultures, specific parts of the body, asking for help with that part of the body, thanking for the help received. Again, more or another of these small possible altars that you could get home. This was a big offering basin, but what's interesting about it is that the carved were then filled in with bronze that was attached. How pretty that would have looked.